Good morning, everybody. It's me, Robert Phoenix, and I'm back once again for the Astro Weather, which I don't know if it has anything to do with the actual terrestrial weather, but the terrestrial weather, to some degree, I think it does. But the terrestrial weather here is frozen. The world is frozen. And I've been having some glitches with the power over the last 2 or 3 minutes. So we're going to hope that the Texas power grid stays online while we're able to complete today's brief sojourn into the conditions, the celestial conditions. I hope everybody is staying warm and nurturing yourself with this Cancer moon, right? Supporting a storm kind of day. And if you can hang out, chill out, relax, make a pot of soup, right? Better yet, have somebody else make a pot of soup for you. And then even better yet, the two of you can share that pot of soup. Today's your day. All right, let's get into the astro weather. And I've been talking about the approach of the moon here. And it's I actually really like it, right? Because we have this Venus moon trine, Venus in Pisces, moon in Cancer, moon conjunct Pallas. You know, everything on an emotional and intuitional level is really emphasized today, and for a number of different reasons. It's not just with the moon. So if you can hang out and have some quiet time, you'll be able to see things that can come to you through patterns, right? Patterns and insight, cycles. The moon is related to cycles, tides, seasons, etc. So here we have a moon Pallas conjunction. And the moon is at 8 degrees at 8 o'clock. A little later, it'll be at 9 degrees, and Pallas is at 11. So we have a 9-11 moon Pallas conjunction later in the morning. So, you know, Pallas here, retrograde, has you looking back into the past, right? I mean, that's the function of Pallas. And Cancer is a sign that looks backwards. It looks into your family history. It looks into your memories. And we can learn things from the past. Sometimes we hold on to the past a bit too long. And Saturn will take care of that, right? Saturn will take the scythe and separate the dead growth from the ground. That's what Saturn does. But today is one of those days where looking back into the past might prove fruitful. Like there might be some benefits to looking back into your history, your personal history, your family's history. And I've been talking about this day as a day of forgiveness, right there. I mean, there's a vibe in the air where if people can get past a brief burst of emotional volatility, right? It's like this burst comes your way. If you get past a brief burst of emotional volatility, let that calm down. There can be some interesting resolution today for things that aren't even like on schedule, right? And when we deal with this idea of the moon, we're dealing with unconscious or subconscious forces. So they're not necessarily mapped out or planned out. They seem to arise out of the ocean of our consciousness, individual and collective. So this is an interesting time. You know, this morning I got up, I stayed in the Andrew Breitbart pocket for the last 24 hours. And I'm convinced that Breitbart was a bona fide genius. And I asked myself, well, where would the Aquarian contrarian be in today's world? Like, where would he be? How would he have evolved? And seeing what's happened to the Tea Party, seeing what's happened to the conservative movement, it'd be very interesting. But we'll never know. We'll never know because Andrew Breitbart is no longer with us. But I stayed in the pocket, so I was looking at some of his speeches and press conferences, and doing my best to kind of see, like, well, where was I at that time? What was I going through? What kind of particle of awakening was I latching onto? And again, I feel like I was on this parallel track with Breitbart, but coming at it from a very, very different perspective. And that's just one example, right? Like that's one example of dialing up the past and seeing where there's patterns. And I'm not done with that piece yet, because today's star of the day kind of comes into a very similar comparison. Some contrast, but similar comparison. So here we go. We also have the moon opposing Mercury. Now, when you get into a moon Mercury opposition, what are your choices? Your choices are, do I go with my gut or do I go with my head? And with Mercury and Capricorn, it's all about time and the bottom line. The moon in Cancer, it's more about, I have to take that mineral bath today, that hot mineral bath today. And I don't have to deal, so we're in this kind of oppositional world. And the moon in Cancer is sentimental. And Mercury in Capricorn is not. Mercury in Capricorn is, let's cut 500 workers. That'll get us close to profitability again. And hopefully we'll be able to hire some of those people back, once we are able to be up and running and efficient and making a profit. That's Mercury in Capricorn. Moon in Cancer is like, no, you can't cut them. Some of these people have worked at this corporation or this company for 25 years. They have family, they have kids, right? So we get into this dialectic with the moon in opposition with Mercury. And not just today, but we'll get into it tonight and even partially tomorrow when the moon begins to separate and climax in this full moon in Leo, which we'll be talking about tomorrow at 8 a.m. and looking at the weekend. So this is a very interesting day. Now, how do you deal with that? Well, Mercury seems like it's going to rule the day, right? Because when you look at Capricorn, it's at the top of the chart. Cancer's at the bottom. So you would think that, it's going to be Mercury's day. But lo and behold, we also have Mercury slowly moving into sextile with Neptune, which helps with a more intuitive process, right? It's really funny. I was sometimes I kind of go onto these YouTube videos and I'll comment about something which probably has very little interest to the rest of you. And then every now and then I'll get into a debate. And one of the guys that I was getting into a debate with yesterday was talking about logical, facts-based, rational thinking. And I appreciated that. That's where he went, which is very Mercury in Capricorn. And and he never responded to me. And I asked him about if he had ever read Blink by Malcolm Gladwell. And I don't know if he had or he hadn't, but if you haven't read Blink, it's one of those books that I recommend, because Blink talks about this intersection between the mind and processing data and intuition, right? It's a very interesting look at how we make these intuitive leaps, and how our personal history, the things that we've learned, especially if we're really, really good at something and we kind of master it, when you get into those 10,000 hours or the 10,000 tasks of Malcolm Gladwell, how that happens. Today's a Blink day. There's a reason I'm bringing it up. Today's a Blink day because that's where the energy is, right? It's like, are you struggling with the intuitive approach? Are you struggling with the mental approach? Are you struggling with being more sentimental in some ways, right? Softer, which is really what the Cancer moon is calling out for. It's calling out for you to soften up, but not necessarily be a doormat. You can't be a doormat with Jupiter in Aries and, in the conjunction with Juno and kind of in the outer conjunction with Chiron. But there is a pathway to that, and that's the Mercury Neptune sextile. So trust what you know. Trust what you know. Trust what you know. And when you tap into trusting what you know, then you can really act on it, right? And you'll trust what you know because it'll happen fast. It'll happen quickly. You don't have to deliberate a lot about it. So if you feel like you're getting hung up between a more kind of gut-based, intuitive response to this more mental, meticulous, efficient approach with Mercury, right? Just run it through your processor very quickly and just move on it, right? Because that's how you're going to get kind of out of the, you know, the potential of the T square, because Mercury is also squaring off against Chiron. It's still separating, so it's moving further away, but this is a cardinal T square today. And when you have cardinal energy, it sparks, right? Cardinal energy initiates. So you speed up the process when you don't get hung up, right? When you don't get hung up. Now, you can run everything through your emotional body and, you know, do like a diagnostic. Does this check the box? Does this check the box? Does this check the box? But do it quickly. Do it quickly, because we've been doing this now for a while. We've been in this process of putting things together and waking up and doing kind of comparative analysis and, you know, looking at things like neuroplasticity, neuroscience. I mean, I could go into this chat and have a dialogue with each and every one of you, and I'd be able to find some talking point that would relate to this. And at some point, we have to understand what we know, right? This is the big issue. We have to understand what we know. And this brings us back to the topic du jour of the day, and it has to do with, because there were people that trusted their gut, they understood things, they made rapid fire decisions based on what they knew. They crunched the data quickly, whatever that data was, whatever it was, whether it was as a reflex to the constant hammering of the 24/7 news cycle and more, having some 2-bit celebrity tell you that you should go out and do something. And if you didn't do it, you were a pariah, right? Go back in time. You knew what you knew. You knew what you knew, and all you needed was a couple of people to stand with you during that time and say, no, we're not going to do this. That's a very Cancerian thing. That's how Cancer operates, right? It's like, no, Cancer is conservative. It's a conservative sign. Capricorn is too, but they have different models of conservation. This is one of those days where the decisions you made are going to be fleshed out. They're going to be fleshed out, literally fleshed out. So for all of you who crunch the data, process the information, and this is the big thing around that, is that we live in a world where that kind of rapid fire processing based on a combination of the body-mind connection was completely invalidated. Completely invalidated. Why? Because there were a bunch of talking heads that got into their head that were not connected to their body for whatever reason, whether it was a profit-driven motive or whether it had something to do with a much darker agenda. They were not, they were faux Cancer. They were faux Cancer. Oh yeah, we care about you. We care about you. So everybody who made these decisions based on this kind of somatic processing that we all have, it's really how we are wired. And what's happened is that the dominant paradigm has taken us out of that. It's taken us out of that processing. And today is one of those days where you can sit back and you can look, because this is what Cancer does. You can sit back and you can look and you can say, you know what? I made the right decision. Now, let's say you didn't make the quote unquote right decision. You're still going to look back and there's going to be different ramifications. And this is where we get into this moon square with Jupiter. This is where, when people over the past 2 years, 3 years, we're coming up on a 3-year cycle. It's a big cycle, by the way. They're looking back and they're having a different experience. This is one of those days where it really gets fleshed out. And for those of you who were able to process, know what you know, and move on, kudos. Kudos to you. This is a day where those who have not might learn a thing or two. And I'm not here to harangue them or dip myself in the waters of Schadenfreude. No, there's always a potential to learn. And sometimes lessons are hard. Sometimes they're hard. Depends on, what degree of difficulty you want to deal with, right? I mean, so there was a group of people that put their foot in the ground and said no. And those were difficult choices. Really difficult choices. Careers were crushed. Families were shattered. Relationships cleaved. But they got the hard stuff out of the way. The other group made choices that were different. And again, I'm not here to demean them by any stretch, but now they get to deal with the hard stuff, right? So you're going to deal with hard stuff either way, which is very Cancerian, right? You look at the yin and you look at the yang and you look at the symbol, and it's like, yeah, you're going to get both. Do you want to front load it or do you want to back load it? Because either way, it's not going to be easy. It just depends on, what level you want to check into. And, Saturn here is just hanging out today. I mean, look at it. We got a quincunx with the true node, and then we have a sesquisquadrate. I mean, that's it with Saturn. It is sitting at 26 Aquarius. You know what that's like? That's like sitting out there naked. Your own authority, naked. And really, that's what we are. At the end of the day, we are 26 Saturn in Aquarius. And then eventually what happens is we look around and go, we're not naked and we're not alone. There are other people who are part of this journey. But today, there's such an interesting day. Your own inner authority stands out, and the external authority is exposed. So, I'm not a huge advocate of hyping certain days, but today is a really interesting day astrologically. Sit back, see how it unfolds, watch, because with the Cancer moon in this position, conjunct Pallas, receptivity is really on tap and on display. So, in ending, before we go to the star of the day, I just want to come back to the fact, to the point that people have an innate ability to process information, an innate ability. In what happens is that the dominant paradigm, the dominant culture, the one that wants to suck your soul, has essentially told you many times along the way that you don't. And this is why we're behind the curve. This is why we're behind the curve. Now you have to take responsibility for that. In 2020, that was a time where it's difficult lessons. But if you took responsibility for your innate knowing and your inner guidance system, well, sitting here today, this is your reward. This is your reward. And congratulations for that. And for folks who didn't trust themselves and or who did something in order to fill in the blank, all is not lost. All is not lost. You may have to reroute yourself. You may have to figure out what you're going to do with your health, but there's always something to learn from the process if you're open to it. All right, let's get into the star of the day. The more that I dive into Aquarius, the more absolutely fascinated I am with the sign. It's a fascinating sign. I got to tell you. It's a frustrating sign, but it's also a fascinating sign. And you can see kind of the level of activism. You can see the level of throwing, lightning bolts against systems of conformity on both sides, not just the left. And there's plenty of radical lefties that are Aquarians. There's radical righties too. We just had Andrew Breitbart yesterday. Well, today's star of the day is Ayn Rand. And she might have set the standard for the radical righty. And this is one of her famous quotes here. Now, Ayn Rand was born in Russia. She was born in St. Petersburg. And she was born in 1905. 1917 rolls around. She's 12 years old. She's watching the Bolshevik Revolution. Her parents were not into it. They moved to Crimea, and eventually they wind up in the United States. So here's her quote. There is no difference between communism and socialism, except in the means of achieving the ultimate end. Communism proposes to enslave men by force. Socialism by vote. It is merely the difference between murder and suicide. Well, that's some strong medicine coming out of Ayn Rand. But when we look at her chart, we can see echoes of Andrew Breitbart, actually, in a number of different ways. So remember yesterday, we looked at Breitbart's ascendant, which was right at the end of Pisces, and he had his Mercury and Chiron and Saturn and Aries in the first house. And he has the same degree of Venus, 29 Venus, that Ayn Rand has in Pisces. Kind of interesting, right? And they're born, this doesn't always happen. Just because you're born on the same day or close to the same day, Venus could be in a radically different position. It could be further, it could be ahead, behind, right? There could be Venus in Aquarius. There, if it's a retrograde phase, there could be Venus in Capricorn, but they both share the same degree of Venus in Pisces. And they both have Aries on a cardinal point. For Breitbart, it's on the ascendant, right? It's on the ascendant every day. Every day he is fighting the fight. He has to get through sort of the morass of the social liberal programming that he grew up with in LA. But once he does, he comes out swinging. True node in Aries, Chiron in Aries, Saturn in Aries, bang, right? For Ayn Rand, she has a very different approach. Hers is to the world at large. So it's writing books and becoming kind of a figurehead. They're both figureheads, but they're coming at it from different ways. And for Ayn Rand, it was her work. And for Andrew Breitbart, as much as it was his book or his website, it was his personality. She's different, though. The other thing that's interesting between the two of them is they both have Mars and Scorpio. And again, they're born in very different times. Andrew Breitbart's born in the 70s. She's born in 1905. She has Venus in Pisces. She's got Mars in Scorpio. Both of them have Venus in Pisces, same degree, Mars in Scorpio, and their suns are separated by 1 degree. And then you can even see the migration, right? The migration from Russia to the United States. It's very ninth housey, right? And she also has Black Moon Lilith conjunct her midheaven. So I think that Ayn Rand was, and in fact, her Black Moon Lilith is conjunct Andrew Breitbart's true node in Chiron. It's very interesting. It's almost like, in some ways, Ayn Rand is the ideological dark mother of Andrew Breitbart. And I don't know what his history or background was with any of her books or her ideas of objectivism. But the other thing too is they're both kind of raised in this sort of Jewish diaspora. Breitbart is adopted and he's raised by Jewish parents. And by the time she's, clicking her heels much later in life, Ayn Rand is an avowed Zionist. And that's probably something that Andrew Breitbart, with his time in Israel and his connection with Netanyahu and Steve Bannon, probably something that he would not have been opposed of. He never really talked about it. She did. So what else can we glean from her profile? Well, look at everything behind the sun. Ceres, Chiron, they're in Aquarius. But then we get into Pallas and the moon. But that's really interesting because that's what we're talking about today. Pallas and the moon. Understanding these cycles, understanding these patterns, but understanding it from an intuitive place, an inner knowing. And for Rand, you know, that moon, Capricorn moon is what it's in its fall, right? So she's having a very different kind of processing experience, you know, and she can understand the sort of the heavy weight and burden of totalitarianism, right? This is behind her sun. This is where she's coming from. Think of it in those terms. She's coming from Bolshevik communist Russia, and she understands the weight and burden of totalitarianism. And while she is not a religious person and her objectivism, you know, screams secular humanism, she no doubt understands the evils that man can perpetrate on another man or woman for that matter. It's also very interesting how she has to work out the Mercury moon conjunction. And it's not a common conjunction in astrology. You're having to deal again with this idea of the intuitive and the mental approach. But if you can understand that, if you can work on that, if you can kind of master that, then you get into this instant processing that I'm talking about, that what you're feeling and what you're thinking are the same thing, right? They're the same thing. They're not fighting for oxygen in your process. And I would also say that she probably had a lot of deep personal anguish in her chart as well, and in her life. It's a really interesting chart. I think her work is interesting, but I also feel like there are things that she misses the mark on. And I don't want to get into a too deep of a discussion about that. But like Breitbart, she's a fighter. She's got that Mars Sun square, which is totally fixed. Like it's a fixed square, and she's not going to back down from the fight. Not with an Aries midheaven, not with Jupiter and Aries. You know, she also has this this balsamic moon. You know, and people with balsamic moons have an inherent sadness about them because they're always having to let go. So she had to let go of her country. She had to let go of her relations with her country. Her family had to let go of their relations with their country and their history and their past and their ties and their roots. That's all here. That's all baked in here in the back of her chart, right? And she's also expressing radical ideas, even though Uranus is at a much different degree than her Mercury. They're still in the same sign. And this brings up a kind of a different discussion about conjunctions and the power of a conjunction. It's a very interesting chart. And she's got that true node in Virgo. And when you look at her work, you know, man should be judged by, you know, the quality of his character. It's a very Virgo kind of idea. You know, there's a purity about it that speaks to people, right? The incorruptibility of the individual who makes the correct moral choice. And this is really the fountainhead of her work. You can see it right there in the true node in Virgo. All right. Ayn Rand, the star of the day, a very interesting person. I don't always agree with her. But again, when you look at the cast of characters in the Aquarian pantheon, they're really interesting. And they change the world, right? They are pouring the contents of new information into our experience, whether they're on the Angela Davis side of things or on the Andrew Breitbart side of things. Fascinating sign. And we have a lot more of Aquarius to go through before, you know, we run through this list of fascinating characters. And then we're on to Pisces, which in its own way might be even more interesting than Aquarius. Go figure that, in a different kind of way. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a really blessed day. Hook up your somatic technology. Keep making the right decisions and don't regret. Don't live with any regret. Take care and bye for now. Oh, I can't do that. I need to do a couple of things. I got to talk about my sponsor before I go. And I got to give some love to the Aquarian High Council and, of course, my own show, which follows this. So apparently, True Ham Science, who, of course, is the sponsor of the show, is getting ready to unleash the gummies, the moon dust gummies. And let me pull them up here. The moon dust gummies is, man, I actually have some. I get the test product, but I haven't taken the moon dust. I have taken them, but I have to make sure I'm in the right environment and kind of able to go with where today we got moon and Cancer, right? It's a good day to talk about the moon dust gummies. So they're coming, and they'll be available on Chris's site. No, I don't think anybody has moon dust gummies. I could be wrong. I don't go to all the various CBD sites, but I know that Chris is really cutting a unique path here, and it takes a lot of work to make these gummies. The processing around it is not always that easy. Anyway, you can find the gummies coming soon to trimscience.com/ref/23, trimscience.com/ref/23. Gummies, both for the moon dust and for your sleep, a whole litany of CBD products, water soluble, non-soluble, CBD for your pets, topical salves. It's all here. Spend $100 or more and you're going to get free product. All you got to do is type in 15MINS and those are your goodies. You'll get them. 150 more gets you free shipping. I wanted to talk about the Aquarian High Council here, give some more love to Emily Trinkhouse, who is putting this all together. Let me see, I got to find it. I can just go to my Twitter feed. I have it on my Twitter feed. So the great thing about the Aquarian High Council is that you can attend this virtual webinar and it's free. You just got to sign up for it. That's it. That's it. Right here. It's the Aquarian High Council, February 3rd through the 7th. And there's a whole list of people that are going to be there. Jeff Harmon, Daniel Jamario, Eric Francis, a lot of people. And there's going to be panels, individual interviews. Nobody's done this before. And I'm really excited for Emily. So if you're into astrology, you're into outside astrology, you're into Mavericks. Look at that wave. It's just like Mavericks outside of Half Moon Bay. If you're into Mavericks that use astrology in a very different kind of way, and everybody's got their own individual imprint, this event is for you and it's free. That's incredible, right? It's really incredible. And I hope that we can get as many people there as possible so they can do it again next year. And we can have kind of an annual event with that. And lastly, I have a show that I do at 9/11. And that's the details for my show, 15minutesoflame.com, 9:11 a.m., 10:41 a.m., Central Standard Time, right here in the frozen tundra of Central Texas. We're going to be looking deeper into the egg crisis and maybe one of the reasons why eggs are on the hit parade. So jump on over, hang out. We got a great chat there. And I do this Tuesday through Thursday. Tomorrow on this channel, we'll have the Crimmies. I'm really looking forward to reconnecting with them. Always the first Friday of every month. And if you want to, you can always support the show. Go to my website, robertphoenix.com, or you can go to 50 Minutes of Flame. I've got a level of membership that you can sign up for. What else? hit the like, subscribe, tell your friends about it. And that's it. Have an awesome day. Bye for now.